Okay, welcome back. So here we are in Linux and Unix administration. We're going to go over to the vault.cybernatos.net and download our disk resource for this class, which is System Foundations. So in this one, systemfoundations.ova contains 3 machines, contains a FreeBSD image, a Linux image, and a Windows image. Now it may take a little bit of time to download that. And so we're going to see how long it takes. In the event that that comes down okay, no biggie. So once that's downloaded, then I can go ahead and replace the System Foundations folder you see here on the screen with the one from our classroom. Now, since we're here, we can go ahead and configure a virtual machine or show you how to configure a virtual machine to have an additional adapter. So going through and looking for that additional adapter, those little settings there, I'm going to go ahead and cycle through here. I'm going to try to bring that up on the screen here. And I'm not seeing it just yet. Okay, what we can do though is over here for the Virtual Media Manager. The Virtual Media Manager, that's just a place to keep your ISOs and stuff. We're going to look at the Host Network Manager there. On the Host Network Manager, go ahead and go in, and we're going to add VBox Net 0. And you'll see that pop up on the screen here when we get into it. So click on that right there, and you see that we have VBox Net 0 right there. Couple of options with that. Make sure it's 192.168.56.1, and then make sure the DHCP server is not enabled. Now, to disable that DHCP server or to enable it, first go ahead and add the VBox Net 0. Make sure the IP is set to manual and everything's right there. Then close it. Then go back into File, the Host Network Manager, and then click into it again and disable the DHCP server. So you need to do that. You need to go into that 2 times to get rid of that stuff there. So you can see that's disabled there on the DHCP server on both the little tab and the other place. Now the way you enable another interface is you'll go in and just click a machine. Now I'll show you in the machines we downloaded from class in just a second. It's going to be downloaded in just a second there. And as soon as that's downloaded, then I'll be able to show you those machines to you. But if you look over here, we're going to just give you an example on one of my other machines. Go over to Settings. Inside of Settings, go to Network, and you'll notice that the second adapter is enabled. Now, when we enable that, we're actually going to change that over from NAT network. We're going to change that to host only. But don't worry, I'm not going to do it right here. I'm going to wait till we get the other ones in there. So I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to pop open System Foundations so that you can see these machines. Now in System Foundations, I'm going to go over to Linux Mint. We're going to clone that. So we're going to make the master and the clone over on Linux Mint. The way you can do that, of course, is just right-clicking that thing and choosing clone, and just the way we do it in class. I prefer expert mode on the clone because whenever we clone that thing, it is oops, I forgot. be sure you change the name first. Change that to master, and then go in, and you might want to go ahead and change the network settings. So go into settings, and then go to network and add the second adapter. Now when you add it, we're going to look at a couple of options there. One is, of course, we've got that network address translation and a couple of options. So NAT means that it's going to give you a private address. Remember that 10.anything, 172.16 through 172.31.255.255 or 192.168.anything are private addresses. Now, on those private addresses, it's going to give you one that's going to be 10.0.2.15, and that is your machine's private address. It can then go network address translation out to the internet from that address. Every machine you create with NAT will have the same IP, 10.0.2.15. So they cannot see each other, but they can see the internet. Now over here, NAT network means that, okay, all those machines are on a network and they all get like 10.0 10.0.2.15, 10.0.2.16, 10.0.2.17, things of that sort, and they can all get to the internet. But they cannot see your host computer, I don't think. A bridged adapter puts it on your network. So if you've got a 10.10.10 network, then you make it bridged, and it gets an IP address off the DHCP server the same as your computer did. Internal network means that it only has an internal dummy network adapter. It's as if the network adapter is there. The network adapter says it's plugged into a switch, but that switch is not plugged into anything else. So it's just there. It cannot go anywhere. It can't get to other machines. It can't get to your machine. It can't get to the internet. Host-only adapter is the one we're going to choose, and that's for our second interface. The host-only adapter allows us to get to the machine from our host machine and then get between machines with the however many machines we're running. So that's the one we're going to use. And then generic driver is just some kind of generic driver option that they have in there. So moving right along, we're going to go ahead and make a clone of that. Let me see if I can find the clone process there. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that cloning process. In this case, I'm naming it Linux Mint 20.1 clone. I'm making it a linked clone, so not a full clone, but a linked clone. And then if you look down on the MAC address policy, we're going to look down there and click on that thing. And if you see that right there, you can choose generate new MAC addresses for everything. Then click clone. It only takes about 5 seconds to clone a machine. That's on the high end. And so you'll have that machine cloned and it'll be ready to go. Let me rearrange things here, make it a little more neat. I'm going to power on both these machines right now. Now at this point, I don't have the virtual machine guest editions and nothing else installed in there. So we're going to walk through that process. We're going to bring up both machines here on the screen. We're going to walk through that process and see if we can get these machines to work. So as those come online, we got both of those coming online here. First thing I'm going to want to do is actually install Vim once I get these things up. Vim is the VI improved. So let's power these things on and we'll look over at VI improved. So once we get, oh, sorry, forgot this. One of the things is it'll pop up to this welcome screen. When you see the welcome screen, choose traditional panel layout. Go to first steps and then choose traditional panel layout. By choosing the traditional panel layout, then you'll be able to use all the features in the machine. If you choose the modern, then the windows get on top of each other and it's just kind of a pain in the neck. So choose the traditional right there. After you do that, we're going to go ahead and move forward and open up a terminal. Now, when we open up this terminal, because this is a re-video, it's where I'm actually having to take a video for the second time, which is sorry about that. YouTube didn't like my first 2 recordings. So I'm just playing the video on my screen and I'm doing a voiceover commentary. But what you'll see here is we got the sudo-s. That sudo-s is super user do-s versus switch user, SU, which is SU, just switch user, switches users to different users on your system. Switch user dash switches over to user 0, which is root. Now over here, we're going to keep moving forward. And so we're going to do a sudo-s, which makes us super user shell. So that's a super user do what? -s, which is shell. So now we've got a shell going. In that shell, we're going to do an ifconfig. Now, if you look at that ifconfig, our adapter names are really weird. EMP0S3, EMP0S8. But we only have 2 interfaces. Why is one 3? Why is one 8? If you add additional interfaces, they have just the same wacky numbering. You never know which one's the first, which one's the second, other than it's in line, right? And ifconfig does a good job of showing it in order. So we're going to fix that. In order to fix that, we're going to use VI improved. Now, to use VI improved, when we go through and use the apt-get install, so over here you'll see me in the left window typing apt-get install vim Let's see, I kind of lost the video there for a second. It's the apt-get install. Come on. There we go, on the right window. Apt-get install vim, and I put a -y on there so you can see that. We're going to do the same thing in the other one. Remember, there are only 3 things you need to understand with vim, or 3 things you need to know. One is escape to get out of whatever menu you're in, :WQ for write and quit. Next one, escape : Q exclamation for quit, don't save, and then I for insert. Those are the only 3 things you need to know. So the first 2 key combinations, that escape : WQ or escape : Q exclamation, easy, and the other one is just the letter I for insert. So let's go ahead and edit this thing. We're going to edit Etsy default grub. So let's see if I can find that in here, and we'll go ahead and edit. Well, you know what? Let's change this. Let's go over and change our font. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to choose a good mono font there, something that's a little bit easier for us to read. So, and we're going to go to colors, and we're going to choose green on black, no transparency in the background. I'm going to do that. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to do that because it makes it a lot easier to see. In the future, when I get the windows all expanded out, you'll see that that's a lot easier to see, so it won't be any problem at all. So we're going to go ahead and choose that there. I'm going to clear the screen. Once I clear the screen, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to VI that file. We're going to do an update on Grub. And that VI is going to be VI Etsy default grub. And then we're going to go into Grub and go down, and we're going to pop in the command. So Etsy default grub. Oops. Not grub D. Etsy default grub right there. Okay. So Etsy default grub. Then go down to Grub command line Linux, and then press the letter I there for insert. You can see in the bottom right down here, you can see insert inside that window. And type net.ifnames = 0 right there. That line. So on the other machine, we're going to do the exact same thing. On the other machine, we're going to go over. We're going to do a VI Etsy default grub. Go down to Grub command line Linux. And go between those right there, type the letter I for insert, and type net.ifnames = 0. Once you get that, press escape : WQ, enter, and escape : WQ, enter. And then we're going to do an update-grub. Update-grub, then press enter. Now what that does is it reads any partitions on your system or any changes to that grub file, and if there are any changes been made, then it applies them on a reboot. So let's go ahead and reboot our system, and we're going to now see our eth0 and eth1 are back, and we don't have to worry about that weird ENS0P38 kind of weird junk. It's going to be all very recognizable and very easy to use. So here we are at our desktop. The desktop, we're going to go ahead and open a terminal. So let's go ahead and pop open those terminals. Go ahead and do a sudo-s. And sudo-s, of course, is super user do shell. So we come over. That's versus switch user, which is su. If you do it su-, that takes you over to the root object, which root is ID 0. We're not ID 0. We're going to talk about that in just a minute once we get everything configured. So we almost have our machine configured here. We're about ready to start our commands. We're not going to have too many commands today. If you saw in the Telegram message, our commands, we're only looking at about 10 or 15 commands, and they're really straightforward. And you're going to find that these are just coming right up, and you're learning them without any problem at all. So eth0, eth1, now we got very logical numbering. eth0, eth1, eth2, eth3, they're all normal. And they're sequential numerically, which is nice. Now, if you notice, we have that eth1 over there, and the eth1 does not have an IP address. Now, we have that inet address, that 10.02.15 on both eth0 on both machines, so that you can't have two machines with the same IP address. except when you're doing NAT, because both of these machines have their own virtual networks they're using, and so they don't see each other in the 10.02.15. What we want to do is an ifconfig on eth1, as you see me typing in the right machine right there. ifconfig eth1 192.168.0.112/24. Puts us on a 255.255.255.0 network. So on the other one, I'll give it a different IP. So ifconfig eth1 192.168.0.111/24. Now we can ping back and forth. So if we want to ping those machines back and forth, we can check the IP address just by typing ifconfig. You can see we have 111 on one side, 112 on the other side. We can now ping with 3 packets both those machines. Or you can ping with unlimited packets, really, whatever you want to do. But we'll just do a ping-C3 and then ping 192.168.0.111. Oops, not 1.111, 0.111. So let me fix that. There we go. All right, now 0.111. So we got that. Now on the other machine, you can see we ping over. So I can ping C3 192.168.0.112. Both of these machines can see each other. You just verified that both those machines can see each other. Now, the last thing that we need to do here is we need to install guest additions. So we need to go up to Devices, and at the top where you choose Devices, go down to Install Guest Additions CD Image, and get that installed. So type exit to get out of these windows, make everything nice and clean. Go up and choose Devices, and then choose Install Guest Additions, which I've already done just now. Go to Devices, choose Install Guest Additions CD Image. It's going to pop up and say, hey, do you want to run this? And you're going to say, yes, I want to run that. Choose Run. When you choose Run, it's going to ask you for a password. So type your password in, the same way that you would get a virus. If somebody sent you a virus in Linux, it just doesn't install it in Linux. You have to say, yeah, install it for me. Give your password. So you go ahead and give your password. It'll install it. This green window or this black window will pop up with green text, and it'll give you a whole bunch of this errored out, this was successful, yada, yada, yada. Once it's done, it'll say press enter continue. You press enter, and then you right-click on that CD-ROM like we just did. You right-click on that CD-ROM on the screen over here. Yes. And you choose eject. And you may have to scroll down just a little bit. So if you look right there, you got eject down there. So go down and choose eject. Once you do that, that'll eject the CD-ROM image. Do that in both machines, and that'll let you do full screen. Now, once you've made that full screen, and we've done that kind of a thing, we now have a fully usable machine. We now have a machine that will resize itself. It's going to run a little more efficiently. You can drag and drop stuff to it, so it's just going to run great. So that thing's going to work really well. I'm going to be using this in the future, so I can give you a full screen perspective if I'm doing videos with it, and that way I can open up the terminal and make the terminal a little bit larger, and we'll be good with that. So let's go through the install again on that. Let's get to the terminal. All right, so there we go. Now let's get to our commands. So let's go ahead and open up the terminal. That's that little black box down the bottom. We'll hit Control-Alt-T. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit. That's Control-Shift+ to enlarge the terminal so you can see it a little bit better. Now, once I'm there, I'm going to type, who am I? Now, that's just, who am I? You can see that student at workstation. It was actually already telling me who I was. So, okay, that's fine. What else can I do? Well, we're going to walk up from W, then who am I, then last. So you notice that W provides you the most information, that the machine's been running for 8 minutes. The who shows you less information. And then, of course, the who am I shows you the absolute least information. And then last shows you information about who last logged into the system. So on the system, you can type W, will show you who's logged in. Who will show you who's logged in. Who am I will show who you are. And then last will show the last people to log into the system. Now you can see how that's the most had just one letter. Who had a little bit less information. It's a little bit bigger word. Who am I is the biggest one, had the least information. So W, the smallest letter, gave you the most information. Then, of course, last gives you all the last logins. Now, there's another thing here, which we talked about root being ID 0. Well, what ID are we? So let's go ahead and look at that and see what ID we are. In order to find out, we can just type the word ID. So by typing ID right there, it tells us that we have a user ID, that UID of 1000, and a group ID of 1000. Then we have additional subgroups set over on the other side. Now, of course, the first subgroup is, of course, your group, but that's your primary group. In Unix and Linux, you have a primary group. That primary group always shows up whenever you type a long listing of your directory. So ls-lh, you can see your username, then the next word over is your group. Now, back in the day, you would all be part of the users group. But, of course, for permissions or security or privacy, that means that you would have your name and then users. So all the users would have access to your stuff. When privacy became more of a thing and people were like, well, I don't want you in my stuff, then the easy fix was just, okay, we'll make everybody their own group. So your username and your group are now the same. They're not the same account. You have a user account student and you have a group account student. They're just named the same. And they don't have to be the same ID, which that stinks when they're not, because you'll get out of sequence with that. You may have a user ID of 1000, a group ID of 1003. That happens. That's just annoying, but just watch out for that. So where is that held? It's held in cat etc password. We'll see where that information's contained. So if you go over cat etc password, you'll see that we got this student down at the very bottom. X, that used to be your password, 1000, which is your user ID and your group ID, student user, and then a couple of commas where you'd have your comments, home student, where your home directory is, and then bin bash, where what your shell is. We're using the born again shell. So the born again shell is a fantastic shell. It's very easy to use, and of course, it's what all of your shell scripting is written in. Now, if you wanted to see your password, you'd have type sudo cat etc shadow. And then it would show you their student, and then that big, long encrypted password. Right there, that huge encrypted password is your password. And that was in etc shadow. Now, etc shadow is not readable by a user account, so you can't see it as a user account. Now, to recap what we've looked at so far, we just type history, and we can see all the commands that we've typed in this session. So history shows us all of the commands. Now, if we type apt-get install-y vim, I'm going to throw that into my history. I need to do that as sudo. Then once we do that, it's now going to be in my history. So if I type history again, you're going to see that sudo apt-get install-y vim show up. So there you go. Those are the different things that we're looking at, except for group, and we need to look at where our group is. So let's go look at cat etc group. And you see that student right there. And 1000 is a group number. So we've got that defined. You see it, student 1000. And that's our primary group. That's just us. Now, what we could do is we can now chown things based on our ID. 1000 is our user ID. 1000 is our group ID. If we want to change ownership, we can do that file.txt. Now, file.txt doesn't exist, so I can't actually do that. But if we did that, if it did exist, I can change permissions based on numbers instead of based on name, because your user ID is specific to you. Now remember, user ID 0 is root. So if you do anything user ID 0, that makes it owned by root, not any user object, just root itself. And that is it. So we can go back through, we can look at our history if you want to. You can bring that up, but that's all there is to it. Hopefully this has been helpful. And there's our history, so you can see all the commands that we typed. Those commands are also going to be in Telegram, so you'll see those things pop in. I hope that this has been helpful, and I look forward to talking to you in the near future.